I will start. Honestly, I did not expect to be reading, so this is going to just be a experiment. Please bear with me. Bill just taught us to do this. Okay, I'll be reading this story because Liana just asked me about it. Oh, no, we're good.
You good?
Yes. Thank you. No, wait, I'm going to read another story.
Are you okay? Do you want to read? We don't have to read.
I'm going to have Liana read.
Okay.
Do you know how to do this?
Yeah. I also will read. I think I'm going to read fast and partially and give you a very quick overview of my work without really reading. This is from my book that just came out that's a memoir. It's called Passing for Human. It's told in, I think, 6 different chapter ones. It keeps starting over. It's kind of about trying to tell a story, and when I explain it in one sentence, I say it's about what it means to be a woman and an artist. It's like creating without necessarily having this long lineage of wanting to make money and a career in your heritage, and maybe having as ancestors people who wove baskets and sewed clothes and made food instead of people who were geniuses. And I think we're also going to be talking about romance today. So I chose the very first chapter one, which is about romance. Here's the inscription. Once upon a time, I lost something. Let's call it my shadow. Prologue. This is me. The long-haired one is me. She says, "What are you drawing?" This heartthrob says, "You." I'm trying to capture the expression in your eyes. When I look at them, I want to be a better person. I think you're my soulmate. And he shows her, no one's ever drawn me before, and I feel like I've been seen for the first time. This is love. Our heroine's fears unarticulated, not her like rats. So, and then he's absent-mindedly turning his coffee into decaf, and that's to show that he's magical. He's got powers, but his tastes are kind of bland. And I love him because he's magical. He might not love me because I think I'm more of a caffeine type. Like, if he loves decaf, he's not gonna end up loving me. And I know this, and I'm trying to keep myself under wraps and kind of pretend that I'm what he wants so that he keeps loving me. So I feel like he's seen me, but I know that he hasn't seen me. It's this weird dichotomy. And the shit is about to hit the fan. He says, "What are you drawing?" This takes place in our heroine's mid to late 20s. She's maybe 27. And she has to admit, it started as a picture of you, but I didn't get the nose right or the hair. And then I thought, maybe I can pretend I was just trying to draw an abstract shape, and voila, and it's just this horrible scribble. And I think comics artists will know that when comics is a really complicated form. There's a lot of kind of math in it of like proportion and drawing the same thing over and over. It's pretty technical. And when you start out, you're very wooden and you can't really get past the first page, and you could spend a year redrawing the first page, and it's just like you lose your ability to tell stories because you can't start with the first word even. And then you got into this field in the first place because you're a storyteller, but it's like losing your voice.
This is true.
Don't take it personally. I say, because I'm afraid he thinks that it's because I don't see him, which actually I think I don't, but I won't admit that to myself. Don't take it personally. I'm always like this. I'm consumed by worry, and I can't decide which lines are the right lines, and whatever I was drawing becomes a scribble. When I watch you draw, though, I get a glimpse of what it would be like if I could still draw the way I drew as a kid. If I'd met you when I was younger, I bet I wouldn't have stopped drawing, because I think she equates like this rigidity and inability to start with the first word to a kind of loneliness, which I don't know if it comes from loneliness, but they're very similar. It's this inability to connect. But I can feel it coming back, she says. I'm so happy we've been spending time together. And he says, so am I, Leola, because that's my name. I hope we can hang out again soon. Oh, I hope we can hang again soon. Vanishing ray comes out of his finger. He vanishes the table that they've been sitting at. And she thinks, here we go again, because this is how all their dates end. He's been really stringing her along. And she's become bold. This is how you become the direct person I am, is by being ghosted so many times that you just start like being really suspicious and being nasty all the time. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but, and he says, darkness descend. But we're a couple, right? Of course. So why do you keep disappearing? Hesitate. I can't tell you that. All I can ask, and he's becoming so romantic, it's like the card he's playing, is that you have faith in me. He's mysterious. When will you come back? Will you come back? Oh, don't cry, he says. Do you want a hug? Okay. And he gives her a hug. I'll see you around. And then I'm crying, wah. And then I'm comforting myself and deluding myself. Sorry, I overreacted. I really do have faith in you. On her way home, our heroine has a visit from the fears that gnaw. They're chewing on her. He's going to leave you, you know. No, he isn't, I say. He's just a little awkward. You can believe whatever you want, but he's going to break your heart. In a small voice, I say, how can I keep him? And they laugh, ha, keep him? How can you, of all people, expect to keep anything? You couldn't even keep your own shadow. And I say, so it's true. I rewrote this part so many times because it's hard to like say something like high drama that's not like something you would say in real life. I feel like I'm like a child acting in a school play or something, just like talking too loudly. And I don't think I ironed this part out enough. So it's true. I remember wondering if I'd lost something when I was 13 or so. Was it my shadow? What do you mean lost? They're talking real talk. Don't you remember you drove her away long ago, and she will never come back. So in this story, it's like mostly pretty true, but I use a lost shadow as a metaphor for lost like ability to connect. And the fears are like telling me that I drove away myself, kind of. And I'm running. A drawer doesn't draw because she loves to draw. And I'm panting. She doesn't draw because she draws well. And they reach my apartment. She draws because once she lost something, and by drawing, she will find it again. And then I begin again, chapter 1. Oop. Okay, that's enough.
Yeah, let me just start from a random place here. I will read this story here. It's called California, and it's from my book, The Voyeurs. December 19th, 2009. A big blizzard stormed down on New York. But Ron and I swapped my Brooklyn apartment for a house on top of Mount Washington in Los Angeles. I go jogging in nearby Illyria Canyon, mostly deserted except for coyotes and rapists, and then I'm singing a Devo song there. You always hear about joggers getting raped and killed in parks. This is because we like to go in secluded places and listen to loud music on our earbuds so we can't hear anyone sneak up on us. I see it clearly. He catches me unawares. I'm too scared to scream. It doesn't matter anyway. He has a madman's superhuman strength, and I'm already a goner. Other times I fight back. I scratch and bite and kick and scream. I summon all of my feminine rage and grab a stick or a rock and bash his head with it. Fucker! I don't run for physical health, though it's a lucky side effect. I run because I'm tortured inside. I run to soothe the violence in my mind, the depression, the panic, the disappointment, the shame, the frustration, the helplessness. You could say I'm running from something, though I'd rather think I'm running towards something, though I'm probably just running just to stay in one place. It seems like life is just maintenance after all. But I am maintaining. And that's it. Thank you. So I want to start with a question for you, Liana, before we get to the fun stuff about Mr. Neutral.
I just wanted to make a nose sound.
Let's get it over with. I want to start actually from your book, Passing for Human. It's a sort of origin story, I think. It's about Mrs. Ashdodi, Leola's first grade teacher?
No, sixth grade Hebrew and Torah teacher.
Anyways, sixth grade. So she's this, I'm going to find it here. She's this cruel woman who humiliates Leola, both by mocking her personally and by mocking her work and throwing away her work. And then, so then Leola draws a cruel comic about Mrs. Ashdodi. Here it is. Let me see. And passes it around. Is this correct? And basically, she humiliates Mrs. Ashdodi back, and she discovers her power here. And she says, "Anger makes me less scared.
Anger makes me brave.
Anger makes me brave." So she becomes a sort of celebrity in the classroom and continues to humiliate Mrs. Ashdodi until she resigns. And then she realizes her powers and she develops a sort of empathy or compassion. And there's a beautiful scene in there where they're dancing. And Mrs. Ashdodi looks like this Frankenstein's monster. And Leola is a tiny, delicate girl. And she says, "Am I to lose my real self so soon after finding her?" So my question is, does anger still make you brave, and does it drive your work? And how do you manage to integrate this with compassion and empathy?
Yeah, that's such a good question. This is a true story. We had this really mean teacher, but she was mean for good reason. She was this brilliant Israeli woman who'd, I think, escaped the Holocaust in some context in Europe, and she spoke like a million languages, and she ended up being a teacher at a kind of Jappy Hebrew day school, in the Jewish way, Jappy Hebrew day school, where kids didn't respect her, and she was very old world, and she was very old, and she wore these like huge shoes and like this black dress and this little greasy bun, and I don't think she actually hit us, but she would like threaten to, and if we didn't memorize enough Torah, she was just from a different world, and she was not nice, and I made fun of her, and all the kids loved it, and it felt so good. And then I think I knew that was enough, and there was no reason to make fun of her again. I'd said what I needed to say, and anything after that was just picking on an old woman and cruel. And somehow once I said what I needed to say, I wasn't angry at her anymore. But I also knew, like, this was the first time anyone at school noticed me at all, and I didn't want to give that up, and I thought, this is my new personality. I have to make fun of people, and I kept making fun of her even though I didn't want to, and I felt like I was making comics about her, and they were dumb. Like, the first comic I made was good, and the rest were dumb. And then my grand finale was, in the book, it's drawing a mean public cartoon about her on the chalkboard that she sees, and she stomps out. In reality, it was leaving something gooey on her chair. And she resigned. I think she resigned, and no one told on me. Everyone was so nice to me, and I felt incredibly guilty. And I stopped drawing for a really long time, and I decided to be a fine artist and not a cartoonist. And I was like channeling my work, my creativity into these really bad paintings, because I think my art really does come from a place of breaking out and being kind of mean, but I felt so guilty, and I hated that about myself, and I still feel that way. I still have a lot of writer's block, and something like this book, I think, is an attempt I have of making something nice and thoughtful, whereas really what comes most naturally to me is something like my Instagram account, where I'm saying these quick kind of mean things, and I'm terrified of overstepping, and I have these long bouts of not making anything because I don't want to overstep. But I'm developing. I was very, very shy growing up, so I think I didn't get inoculated and get a good sense of what's okay and what's not, because I never talked at all. And I think I'm slowly learning a sense of what is mean enough and what is too mean, but I'm learning it really late. So that's why I make comics. I feel like you make comics for a similar but different reason. I feel like you make comics to like, I feel like you feel helpless in real life, and you feel like everything has a different shape and size, and they don't connect to each other, and you bring them all into this one, you bring them all onto paper, and you put them together, and you line them up and turn them into a narrative. And I've never put this into words before. It's this feeling I feel strongly about certain writers that I love. You were my first favorite comics artist, and I love your work so much. And I feel this way about Chekhov too. He'll take real life and he'll turn it into something he'll take it from something really hectic to something really meaningful that makes sense and has a soul inside it, and it's very soothing. And I feel like he probably did that as a way to understand life and feel like he belonged in life. Is that accurate?
Thank you. Thank you for comparing me to Chekhov.
My question, that's the question. Are you like Chekhov?
I'm just gonna bask in that.
Okay, my real question was that I think I think that's why you tell stories. 2, I think you've developed a style to tell stories in that way, where you use always the same number of boxes per page, the same size boxes, and you usually, if your drawing were a film camera, you would always be at the same distance from the people. You're not like zooming all around and like zooming in and zooming out and going up and going down. Mm-hmm. There's an evenness to it that I find, like, also because you draw so like naturally, there's just something so, it's like I don't know, it's like a soothing food. It's like so nice.
Thank you. I used to think I did that out of laziness or like this sort of stasis. But I've been teaching comics recently, which I've been learning a bit from teaching, and I see my students like panning out and doing sort of like film tricks, and I tell them in this very passive way, well, I personally don't think that works. It works better if you keep it static, keep the images going in a consistent and a pretty similar way, because I think film and comics are not relatable to film. They're not prose. I think they're more like graphic design, but using graphic design as a sort of storytelling mode, and storytelling and even poetry, not in that it's poetic, but in that it's distilled down. It has to be distilled down to its basic elements. So I think instinctively I wanted to take out all like anything flashy as far as film or like, different effects. Also, though, it's because I just want to tell the story. I don't really care about bells and whistles. I never studied graphic design, but I think it has to do with, if I had more of a sense of graphic design, I may have played with that a bit more. But that is a technical answer. The reason I think I draw comics, and it may be different now than when I started, but I often find I'm in groups of people or even talking to one person, and I try to tell a story and I get interrupted just before, like, it seems to happen to me so much, and I'm like, God, I must be so boring. But I'll try to tell an anecdote, and then they'll interrupt me with their own anecdote, and I'll be like, I guess my anecdote wasn't. But then I'll go and I'll turn that same anecdote into a comic, and that same person who interrupted me will be like, I loved your comic. And so recently I
no, is that me? Is that person always me?
This wouldn't be the first time I asked you about whether your characters are me.
Oh no, they're never you.
That's what you always say.
No. I can't lie.
No, you are not an interrupter.
Yes, I am. This is an East Coast thing.
But so I just realized that in the past year or so that I become sort of resigned to not being listened to in real life, and I don't know if that's just me or being just an introvert or not. But sometimes I will be like, oh, I guess I'll just save that for a comic. But I think that, when I started out, it was more to, maybe it was the same, trying to, have a voice and this feeling, like you said, a feeling of powerlessness. And, I think everybody has a certain feeling of powerlessness in the world, and everybody does direct it at something, hopefully productive. But it does sort of become another thing, and then you draw comics to be loved, and then you end up the comics are loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this weird thing where you're drawing from powerlessness, and then it becomes power, and then it's very scary. Then it becomes propaganda.
Yes. Then you have this power, and you're like, I don't know how to deal with this power.
Yeah, I don't think it's good to have power. I always wonder what the difference is between art and propaganda, and there isn't much.
Do you feel like you crossed this line of?
Yeah, all the time.
There was one comic I just sort of jotted down a few of my favorite of your gags. Well, I can't even say which is my favorite. They're like all my favorite. There's none that are just. There was one where somebody's saying, "What are you making?" And the character's got a sly look on her face, and she says, "Enemies."
Yeah. Yeah. I worry about that sometimes, but not as much as I could. So it's okay. I wanted to ask you something. I think a reason I don't, that I feel compelled to make truthful art, but I never tell the actual details of anyone in my work. Like, I will write about my family, but I'll take out any details that pin them down as actually my family instead of a family, and it's from fear of offending them. How do you deal with? Do you have a good sense of what will offend people and what won't in your work?
I think this is an interesting question because I am afraid of offending too, but not my family and friends, but like the world. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very shy on the internet. Like, I really admire how you
Oh, yeah.
say these really bold things, and I'm like, and then I see the trolls attacking you, and I'm just like, I'll stand over here. But
I feel worst when I offend like my parents or friends.
yes, and I should feel worse. I've kind of trained my friends and family to accept a certain amount of exposure. I think as I've progressed as an artist, I've gotten more and more deep into it. I think, well, my mother is the biggest example. Like, she's pretty much always hated my doing comics
no.
about it.
I wondered if she minds when you write about her.
And now I'm like, do you mind if I do this comic? And she's like, yes, but I'm okay with it. And I really put, every comic is a little bit more exposing, and she's become more and more resigned to it. She does it for me because she wants me to express myself, and she gives me her blessing, but she's reluctant about it. But I think part of her also likes it too, and I think a lot of my friends are similar. Like, I write about them more and more, and they become more and more inured to it.
I really like when I'm in your comics. I also really like your mom character in your comics. I think you're kind to her. She's like this gentle, wild woman who loves animals.
I do try to be kind to people in comics. I try to show them in their best light and to understand where they're coming from. But it's also the thing about power. No matter how good I make them look, it's still me controlling them.
So your next book, is it time to talk about romance?
Oh, yes, let's.
Okay, the next book that you're planning is a book of comics about like these very intense and relatable dating experiences you've been having. You just started online dating. I feel like you have just reached a point when you are longing so much for a person, which is so beautiful and relatable and heartbreaking. It's so hard to find a person because people are horrible. And you've been posting them on your Patreon, which is the highlight of my week when I read them. And you've been dating some nuanced people. And when did the idea come to you to turn this into a book? And is this a different way of making a book than you've had before? It seems more like you always have this this distance that's very comforting to me, and you've retained the distance, but there's also it's not like raw. I feel like when I write about romance, it's raw, and people can relate to it if they're in it, but they can't relate to it if they're outside of it. It seems just like too wild and awful. But I think yours retain the amused sweetness and are also immediate, and I'm so amazed by that and jealous of that you're able to, you figured out how to walk that line. It seems like much more of a themed book than you usually do, and I'm excited for it to be a bestseller for that reason. I think people are dumb and they buy books that you could describe in one line. Does it feel different? Like, does planning this book feel different than planning your past books?
Thank you. It actually feels the same as Everything is Flammable. And that was a book in which, well, my mother had her house fire, and I went to help her. And then along the way, I was also like, I'm going to do comics about this. And I sort of is like real time writing about it and turning it into a book. So there was like this calculated, approach to it. But this is more intimate, the romance stuff. Like last year I went on Tinder and I started dating, and and I like continually got my heart broke. I'm in my 40s, but I've never really gone on dates before. And I was very naive, I think. I was learning, I think, a lot of lessons that younger people, because I always thought, if you want a boyfriend, you just get a boyfriend, It turns out there's a lot more negotiation. So I tricked myself. And I think that you write about this too with Mr. Neutral, but you were 27,
Yeah.
There's just, it's not even just being tricked. It's like you're lying to yourself, and he's lying to himself, and you're lying to each other, and you both want to connect, but you want different things, and it's a big performance. But anyway, so I just wrote, I went on a date, and then I did a comic about it. No, this is what happens. I got my heart broken, and then I tried to talk about it, and somebody interrupted me, and so I did a comic about it. And then I did it again, got my heart broke again, and I did another comic about it, and so on. And I just kept, it was like some compulsive behavior. And then I was posting the comics on my Patreon, but I haven't really advertised it or promoted it at all because I was afraid that the guys in the story would read it. But in fact, they weren't that interested.
They didn't pay for Patreon.
So yeah, it was a pretty organic process. And then at some point I was like, this compulsion of mine is turning into a whole book.
It's a good dog.
But so let's talk about Mr. Neutral. And also a lot of your comics. I have a multiple choice question for you.
I did pretty well in my SAT.
So a lot of your comics, I think, are about misconnections, about the man wanting one thing and the woman wanting another thing, and the sort of performance that they give each other, and they both end up being, well, one of them tends to be more disappointed at the end than the other, which is the female. But it's a sort of, like, I think what you present is a sort of catch-22 in dating. Like you just can't win because you're wanted for this performance that you give of yourself, but you wanted to be wanted for yourself, and there's like some kind of dance, and at some point the whole performance falls apart. The conga line of past selves. Like, for example, like there's a man and woman talking to each other, and the man says, "I love you," and then there's an asterisk, meaning, well, okay, man says, "I love you." Woman says, "I love you too." Man's asterisk says, "I want to sleep with someone." Woman's asterisk says, "I want someone to love me." Anyway, so my question is, do you think that this continual missed connection is due to A, the immaturity of the characters,
Yeah.
or B, the irreconcilable differences between men and women that will just never be solved, so we'll all just be miserable forever, or
Yeah.
C, the patriarchy?
I think it's two things. One, a culture of not communicating, in not treating romantic relationships as business relationships, and each person saying straightforwardly what they want and need, and to the patriarchy, because I think
That wasn't a leading question at all.
there's such a power difference if you're straight and like certain things that put you at a disadvantage, such as being female and having the biological clock ticking and wanting a kid maybe and wanting to settle down, that I feel like the odds are so stacked against me in dating at this point that like it's the stakes are so much higher for me than for anyone I'm dating, because anyone I'm dating potentially has more time to find someone to settle down with and have a kid with, and it's just not fair. And then there's also the like somehow it's been drummed into us being pretty conservative, like young women from the suburbs, that you're supposed to give a relationship your all. I have a boyfriend now. He has had all these amazing past relationships, and I've been so jealous of him that he's had like these wonderful time, like meaningful several year relationships with many people. And I've had past relationships too. I can't remember a single one of them. Like, they weren't good. They weren't bad, but they were a lot more work than they were worth. And I felt like that. At first, I thought it's because he was better adjusted than me, and I was just so jealous that he got to have this charmed life in a certain respect, and I didn't get to have one. And then I realized I don't know any self-aware woman, straight woman who had good relationships. And I was like, oh, I bet his past girlfriends don't remember their relationships well. I think he just does. And it's because he doesn't care as much. Like, he had a life and he had a girlfriend, and that's why he had such a meaningful relationship. But like all my relationships, it was like that was the main thing, and it was torture.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's harder for women. But I think also like relationships are more fraught for women, and there's more danger in triggering all kinds of trauma. And I also think my impression is that men can just turn their feelings on and off like a faucet where I'm just like broken or something.
I think that comes from putting less weight on a relationship. Like, I can turn my feelings about my friends on and off like a faucet, and I think it's because I've been trained to like, well, first of all, I have many friends, so if I lose one, it's not the end of the world. It's really sad, but I'm not going to like spend a month moping about it. But I would spend a month moping about alienating a person I was dating. Yeah. Does writing about it help and make you think about it differently and not spiral?
I find that it does. Yes. I think it's like therapy.
Me too. I think I was really obsessive about dating, and I think the reason I started Mr. Neutral is not a real person. That said, I started the Instagram to get over him.
Did it work?
Yes, it did. And since then, I haven't been as obsessive about dating, and I also haven't loved anyone as much as I loved him. But I think the love was a cage. I don't think the love was real. I don't think it was he who I loved. I think I believed there was someone out there who would understand me completely, who I wouldn't have to be vigilant and negotiate with. And I think starting the Instagram made me realize that was a lie.
I read the Mr. Neutral part again and again because it was like my own story again and again. I think that there is something here where she tells Mr. Neutral about her imaginary friend Jonah.
That was real.
When she was a kid, she had an imaginary friend who was a boy who she'd never actually met. And then Mr. Neutral's like, I'm Jonah, in this weird way. And I think what's happening is that what we have is two very creative people, artists, just like meeting at this donut shop and like connecting over art. And she's pretending to like donuts for him, by the way. they're both sort of like trying to be what the other one wants.
He's not trying to be what she wants. Oh, no, you're right. He's pretending to be. He's not trying to be what she wants. He's pretending to be what she wants because he knows he can manipulate her feelings.
He's playing a part because that is what romance seems to be, is playing a role in a romance movie.
And if you don't care so much, you can pretend. Then
it's really fun if you're not so invested.
Yeah.
But then he is, and he maintains his mystery, basically. And Leola cannot maintain the mystery. He's just like, wait here. Yeah. Just stand here and wait for me. And then he just disappears.
Yeah. Yeah. He did. I really did have an imaginary friend in 3rd grade who I thought was a real person who lived far away, and we were telepathically connected, and I didn't have any real friends. But, like, it was okay because I had a better friend than anyone with real friends has. And this man's birthday was the same as my imaginary friend's birthday, and I just knew it was him. I was like 27. It was a madness that descended upon me.
That's what happens. It's a sort of madness and magical thinking that you just like connect all these coincidences or synchronicities, and you're like, this is really meaningful.
Yeah.
It just sounds like it's kind of a form of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
I think love should be in the medical, the psychological manual. What is it called?
Yeah.
The DSM.
Yeah. Do you think that you would be satisfied with real love? I think you would. But what do you think? Instead of like, if you found someone and you like cooked together and washed the dishes and fought and watched TV and got tired of each other and like farted in front of each other, like, is that what you want?
What is it like to fart in front of someone?
I wouldn't. Women don't fart in front of people, but, you know, be farted in front of.
No, if we're really going to let it hang out.
I even feel like this conversation is like we're like all evolving so much on gender and sexuality, and like even this conversation I feel like is on the cusp of being dated. And I'm sorry for if I'm offending anyone by being like, women be like not farting.
I think we have failed the Bechdel test.
Yeah, I know. I always thought, okay, to be so offensive, I always wondered if the Bechdel test was just like a lesbian friendly test, because like sometimes all women talk about is men, and that's like
we have to in order to figure them out.
Straight women,
to protect ourselves.
I've understood the Bechdel test more and more as I've gotten older, because I think talking about men all the time is a sickness. But
men are so interesting.
They are, yeah.
Okay, sometimes I read your comics and you're writing about friends, and like some friend is doing some flaky, annoying thing, and I'm like, oh my God, that's totally me. And I go to you and I'm like, is that me? And you're like, no, it's not you.
I think I am I think we're similar in that we really need a lot of personal space in a certain way. Like, I don't like to be touched in a surprising way, and I don't like loudness. Like, a lot of things, I'm kind of like an animal. A lot of things scare me, and I think it's like a brain wiring thing mixed with a fear of that all women have of being assaulted. And it's like this weird pathological thing where if someone touches my leg on the subway with their leg, I feel like I could almost punch them. And sometimes when I have a friend who doesn't have the same fears, like, it's usually an acquaintance or not a friend, but like sometimes something will startle me, and I'll make an Instagram about the feeling of being startled, and that's a way to isolate that thing from the actual person who did it. But that said, you're like the least startling person and the least like persistent person. Another thing, I just read Oliver Sacks's last boyfriend. Like he didn't date for a very long time from, I think, shame and fear of AIDS, and then someone broke through to him at the very end of his life, and it was this very sweet romance. And the man wrote a book, Bill Hayes. and the book was lovely. And I think I figured out why Oliver Sacks got to date this man, which is that the man was like so persistent and so friendly. And I think Oliver Sacks was very fearful and like very private, but this man was like, hey, he just like, his book is all about how he just talks to every single person on the street and won't take no for an answer. So I think private people need persistent people, even if persistence scares us sometimes. Like it's the Lord's work. So thank you for anyone who is in my Instagrams.
Do you think introverts need extroverts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. We need an extrovert here.
Yeah, I have introvert friends and extrovert friends, and I value them both so much. But it's different. Like when I'm tired, I can't hang out with another introvert because I need someone to lead the conversation for me. You know who you are. Thank you.
Maybe we should open this up for questions.
Yeah. Any questions?
I love this comic.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna go through all your comics and be like, I love this one too.
I have a technical question. Your books are more like the first book of yours that I read, Lucky, was more like your Patreon comics. It was like drawn, it's black and white, it's drawn a little more quickly, there's no color. Your books now are much more careful. I wonder if that means you work in drafts more than you used to. And does that change the way you tell a story? Do you change the story a lot from draft to draft?
Lucky. Wait, I have it at the very. This is a huge Lucky. Yeah, that was like I was trying so hard to do like these really intricate, detailed, and so fictional stories, and they were just like they would take me so long. Like what you were saying about how, like as a cartoonist, you just like you can get stuck doing the same page for like 3 years, and so then like at some point I got so frustrated, and I just started doing like a diary comic every day and didn't do any kind of editing or anything. And
it's still so careful and considered. Like it's so calming. You don't look like you're about to fly off into outer space.
But yeah, I think my work has sort of like gone back and forth. Like I tried to like I start being more careful and editing and doing like intense detailed work, and then I'll give up, and then I'll do more sloppy and loose work, and then that's like a trying to integrate the two, like bring them together has been my life's work. Like it's a question of drawing fast and drawing slow, I think.
Yeah.
Do you draw fast or slow? This is actually one of my questions for you. And or do you have different places where you draw fast in some cases and slow in other cases?
I draw fast in my Instagram, and I draw fast when I submit New Yorker cartoons, and then when I draw a finished New Yorker cartoon, I redraw it slow, and I'm so much worse at drawing slow. And I think that might be because I'm impatient, and I'll give it one pass at like a slow pass, and it's boring, and I'm like, well, I did it, but really you should do it 5 times and work, like consider slowly, which I don't do for some reason.
So thinking and drawing slowly, you think more quickly, so you draw more like the thinking is drawing quickly.
Yeah, when you draw quickly, like intuition takes over, and when you draw slowly, you don't use intuition as much. You use your minds more or whatever.
Yeah, and it is like a constant struggle to connect those two parts.
Yeah, it really is. I think it takes practice. I think the slow just takes a lot of practice, and one maybe gets better at it. Do you think? Did you have trouble with slow before? Like, do you think it made your work not meaningful anymore?
I think I'm kind of the opposite of you. I prefer to draw slowly, and I draw quickly sometimes as like storyboards, but it's like that's what makes me impatient, is drawing quickly, because I just want to make it pretty, I guess. Like I just want to like indulge in it. I don't want to.
You want to like, it's like a fiction writer like you want to find out more details of this world.
Yeah, and I just get into it. I've been talking to my students, and I made up this whole thing about the penciler and the inker. Actually, I didn't make it up. I got it from Dave Sim, but it's like he talks about dividing your own mind up in terms of the penciler and the inker, and there's like two different people inside of yourself, and the penciler pencils quickly, and the inker inks very slowly and very carefully.
Yeah.
And but I want to remove it from penciling and inking but then still thinking. Like sometimes you can pencil with a pen, or ink with a pencil. It's more a frame of mind. Like penciling is thinking with drawing, or thinking with the pencil, and inking is more like editing or presenting or something.
I like editing. I don't like, I really like when I have something like I think the first draft that I make when I'm trying to make a story is really bad. It's just kind of free writing, and I hate not knowing what I'm doing, and I hate myself when I do it. But the second draft is like penciling, and it all comes together and it feels so good. And then the third draft is like inking, and it gives me terrible stage fright. And I'm imagining someone looking at it, and I just kind of willfully make things wrong somehow.
Yeah, self-sabotage. So the middle draft is the sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like penciling when you know what you're doing and you're working fast and you're not thinking of someone looking at it.
You're totally engaged.
Yeah.
Cool. It's kind of like being a middle child. You don't have the pressure of being the oldest or the youngest.
That sounds so nice. I've never heard it like spoken of in such a nice way.
It's like being in the middle stall of the bathroom, nice and safe.
No. Question?
You said your Instagram account came out of it came soon after some heartbreak.
Yeah. With a composite of people.
Yeah. Would you say that sort of calloused you to be able to produce the way you currently produce, which is freely, and does this relationship with pain give you more confidence to experience more pain in the future?
Interesting.
Because it gave you this
Yeah.
calloused, this callous.
Yeah. I think.
Does it change the way you look at future pain?
Yeah, I think I've learned that I'm most comfortable keeping a distance, which I think is why I love Gabrielle's work so much. Like it looks at real things and it takes a step back and it makes sense of them. And I think I did that with the pain of the breakup. And I realized that that the breakup was this thing happening in the distance. And if I could reduce it to its parts, it wouldn't have any power over me anymore. And I've used that since then to figure out things that bother me. I think on the flip side, I've been noticing a lot more things that bother me than I used to, and that's a shame. So I think I've become a lot more paranoid walking on the street because I'm like, oh, it really bothers me when someone brushes me. And I don't think I knew that about myself before. And I think it's better not to know certain things.
So in a way, you become more sensitive.
I think so. Like I've worked through my sensitivity. It's become like my job is working through my sensitivity.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
So you guys both do like diary comics and really personal situations. Do you ever, and like post them on social media, publish them? Do you ever feel very vulnerable? Do you like are just letting this out to everyone?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I feel a mixture. I feel much less vulnerable about the thing that was making me feel bad, but I feel very vulnerable towards like that everyone I know and people I don't know also are seeing this very small personal thing that I wrote that I don't even know if I stand by, and like sometimes I'll notice that an acquaintance or a friend has unfollowed me on Instagram, and I think this is not a person I would have offended if I didn't have an Instagram account, and now I have an enemy, and I probably have more people who kind of like don't like me, like maybe I did something inadvertently like bad or like anti-Semitic, or I'm like like I had a drawing after the Pittsburgh shooting that was supposed to be expressing my grief, that I got a lot of other Jewish people unfollowed me after that, and I think some people I know like think of me as like a hateful person now, and that would never have happened without the Instagram feed, and I think about it a lot. It's really painful.
Yeah, it is something one has to cope with on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think like maybe someone else would forgive themselves more and not worry about it. But maybe that person would be more monstrous and less self-examining.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would be immune to that kind of like getting haters on the internet, and nobody can be. I mean, there's no moment you can, or you gotta be at some point. You're gonna fall prey to. Is it me? Like it gets to you. There's no way it can't.
I think I've also gotten more sensitive to people not liking me. I think like with enough of that on the internet, I'm like very aware of it, like just on the street, or just like I'm kind of paranoid lately, and I don't like that about myself, and I think it comes a little bit from the internet. But it is what it is. I think that's like a lot of us are getting more paranoid and less kind and more guarded. It's a weird time. Any more tenure?
Do either of you both draw a lot? Seems like, do either of you ever get burnout? If so, why or when? And what do you do to break through that?
I get burnout when I get paid for my work for from different venues, and it's so strange to me to get paid to produce something in the future as opposed to like having something happen to me and needing to work it out on paper. And I feel like I have to, it's kind of like fast and slow. I think I have two modes. One mode is art that needs to be made, and one mode is art that I make because I'm asked to make it. And I think they come from very different places. And I hope that as I practice the second mode enough, it'll become more like the first. I think it's good enough, and I'm proud of it. Like when I do work for hire, it's good enough. But when I do enough work for hire and not enough work that comes from me, I start to feel like such a fraud, and I feel very, very down on myself.
I never. Drawing is just such a consolation for me. I don't think I ever really burn out on drawing, but writing is really hard. Like it seems like there's like this I'll never run out of drawing, but writing is more like pulling teeth, chiseling or something.
Is it because you have to be alone when you're writing and you draw with people around?
That's part of it. Yeah, drawing is relaxing. That's fun. Writing is, you have to be alone and like gather up a store of psychic energy or something. Have the right music and like just like enough time, like 4 hours to get like an hour done or something. Like it just it takes more.
Yeah. I like the writing part like the thinking part, and I get so little of it. Like you can't you can't like come up with ideas all day long. It almost doesn't take time at all. Although you can't do it on a very busy day when you're worried about other things. You need to have a quiet day in order to spend 1 second making a good idea. But just like the drawing gets so boring to me, and I don't know why I do it. Like I want to figure out a way to use my brain a little more in the slow work.
But your drawing is perfect.
I like my Instagrams. Those are quick.
It's like so.
That's too dark gray. Although it didn't take too long. I drew them, I don't know, It's fine.
I love that one.
Anyone else? I saw hands back there.
Yeah, I was just curious as to if the character of Pepper was based on any specific person and also any specific dog. Too.
Yeah.
Do you have Pepper here?
She's in most of my presentations. I don't think she's on there. I don't think I have her on my phone either. She was a terrier mix, we believed. She was my dog till I was 12, and she wandered off probably to die. We lived in the country. She had a very deep bark. She was kind of cat-like. She had a personality kind of like a Shiba Inu. Like, she was very smart and wary, and she was very loving. She loved me and my brother so much, and she let us just like pull her ears when we were babies. And she was a real like independent outdoorsy dog, and she didn't eat everything that was in her bowl. She just ate what she wanted. She was great.
Polite dog.
She was white with black spots. I like how you draw dog chins.
I like how you
tried
draw
to lift
dogs.
that from you. Thank you. You give them
Okay.
like a chin.
It's 1:05. How long are we supposed to be talking for?
I think this might be the end. Are you guys ready to stretch your legs? Thank you so much for coming.